Millionaire mocks poor family in a restaurant, and the waitress gives him a shocking note. Does being a wealthy patron justify treating the staff and other customers of a restaurant poorly? Should the staff tolerate everything? James was the highest-spending customer at the prestigious Dream Palette restaurant in Los Angeles. But this time, he went too far. James, a man accustomed to having his whims catered to, frequently unleashed his frustration and arrogance on those less fortunate. There seemed to be a perverse pleasure in his disdainful and haughty behavior. However, the situation was about to change, and James would receive a lesson he would never forget. Over the years, James had been treated like royalty at the restaurant, not because he deserved it, but because of his wealth and influence. He was the typical man who believed his money could buy not only goods, but also respect and submission. However, his latest extravagance was about to become a turning point. Not everyone was willing to tolerate James's behavior. The courageous waiters at the restaurant, tired of his arrogance, were ready to put an end to it. An unforgettable lesson was on its way, one that James could never have imagined. On a quiet Thursday night, James's heart sank when he realized the extent of his arrogance. He finally felt the weight of his actions and knew he would have to answer for them. The story of that night would not be forgotten, ensuring the attention he so craved. Among the restaurants James frequented, Dream Palette was definitely his favorite. This restaurant, a true icon, not only appeared on the best lists in renowned magazines, but also was a sanctuary of elegance and charm. With its captivating decor and a clientele full of celebrities, it was more than a restaurant. It was a stage where the glamour and ego of high society met. James was absolutely enchanted with the restaurant, a true oasis of luxury and comfort. Every detail was a delight for the senses. Cozy chairs that seemed to embrace whoever sat in them, carpets exuding opulence underfoot, and a bar stocked with premium drinks promising unforgettable nights. The walls were a spectacle in themselves, adorned with artworks capturing the essence of beauty and sophistication. The expertly trained staff moved with elegance and efficiency, while the menu, a culinary masterpiece, was the work of renowned chefs, masters in the art of delighting palates with exceptional dishes. In this gastronomic sanctuary, James always felt more than welcome. It was true that all customers received first-class treatment, but he believed he deserved special care, a deference reflecting the amount he spent at the establishment. In his mind, the amount he spent not only bought extraordinary culinary experiences, but also elevated him above other patrons. James visited the restaurant several times a week, creating a spectacle of preference and privilege. Each visit was an event. The attentive waiters always ensured his favorite table was available. If it was occupied, they did not hesitate to relocate the current occupants, all to accommodate James. He reigned in the place and was treated like royalty, a courtesy he attributed to the weight of the generous tips he left. With a presence that did not go unnoticed, James made sure to be the center of attention. He and his guests were always the priority, regardless of who else was present. His loud demeanor and rude behavior towards other customers were his trademarks, creating an atmosphere of discomfort and dissatisfaction among the other patrons. With a confidence bordering on arrogance, James was fully aware of his actions and their impact on the other patrons. He saw himself as someone deserving of a pedestal above all other customers, an attitude that began to drive other patrons away from the place. For James, declaring his love for the restaurant meant expecting a treatment full of indulgence, complimentary drinks flowing freely for him and his guests, 5-course banquets preceded by mouth-watering appetizers and snacks. And as a grand finale, he left an extravagant tip, as if money could somehow erase the memory of his rudeness and unpleasant behavior. Enveloped in the atmosphere of a renowned restaurant, the staff and manager, seduced by the generous tips, rarely dared to confront James, even when his behavior overflowed with displeasure and rudeness. Although many were irritated, the fear of losing their jobs kept them in apprehensive silence. But then came that fateful day, a turning point. The infamous and arrogant millionaire decided to target his arrogance at some unsuspecting customers who were there just to savor the local cuisine. It was a peculiar Thursday, and James, accompanied by a group of friends, entered the restaurant around 10:30 p.m. with an air of celebration. James announced to the waiters that he had something special to celebrate, demanding the most exclusive dishes on the menu. The group already showed signs of drunkenness. The kitchen was about to close, but no one dared to deny the millionaire's request. The chefs, with a mix of resignation and diligence, began to prepare James's extravagant order, starting a night that would prove unforgettable. The environment was filled with customers, most of them families enjoying the final moments of their meals in a tranquil atmosphere. Among these customers, one family, in particular, caught attention with their simplicity. Dressed modestly, they shared a silent and deep connection, celebrating the joy of being together as they patiently awaited the main course that had just arrived. But peace was fleeting with James's imposing presence, and his group's noisy and domineering energy quickly changed the atmosphere of the place. One by one, other customers began to leave, leaving the space increasingly empty. It didn't take long for James to achieve his implicit goal, having the restaurant entirely to himself and his group, a temporary kingdom where they reigned uncontested. However, with his keen eye, James noticed that one table was still occupied. A modest family immersed in their world had just received their dishes and ordered another round of drinks. A malicious smile appeared on James's face. He loved a challenge and was eager to test his ability to disturb the peace of that family. He began his strategy with loud jokes aimed at his guests, but with the clear intention of being heard by the family next to them. His words were filled with veiled insults, a blatant provocation. Then, James began to question in a mocking tone how that family could afford to dine in such a refined place, saying they probably entered the wrong place. With sharp sarcasm, he criticized the family's clothes and dish choices, insinuating doubt about their ability to pay the bill. James reveled in every biting comment aimed at belittling and insulting that family with his venomous words. But the family, wrapped in their own joy, completely ignored James's provocations. They continued their meal, conversing and laughing among themselves, a picture of contentment that only served to further inflame James's irritation. This led him to redouble his efforts in his futile attempt to disturb the harmony at that table. As the first course was delicately placed on James's table, an unusual spectacle began to unfold. The man, with an air of nonchalance, started a provocative game, tossing small pieces of food towards the family. His guests, caught up in the atmosphere he created, burst into laughter and comments, creating a buzz that echoed through the hall. The scene, filled with boisterous laughter, seemed like something out of a movie, but with an imminent twist. James's attempt to maintain control of the situation soon proved futile. The level of his comments reached such an uncomfortable peak that the restaurant staff felt compelled to intervene. For the first time, someone challenged James, calling him out for his inappropriate behavior. James's reaction to this confrontation was one of surprise and displeasure, a clear sign that he was not used to being contradicted. With a tone filled with arrogance and disdain, he proclaimed that those people had no right to share the same space as him in the restaurant. After all, in his distorted mind, his wealth and status placed him on an unattainable level. He mocked the idea that they could even afford anything on the menu, convinced they were beyond their means. As he unraveled his litany of complaints and judgments, a moment of silent dignity unfolded. The family that had endured James's toxic discourse placed the money on the table, a simple but loaded gesture. They stood up, leaving behind nearly untouched plates, but carrying with them an aura of fatigue and disgust at James's venomous words. It was a clear sign that despite everything, they maintained their integrity, something that James, with all his wealth, seemed to have lost. With a furtive glance, James watched the family leave the restaurant. A sense of triumph invaded him. He was convinced they did not belong in that sophisticated environment. His friends, in contagious euphoria, celebrated his victory. They felt as if they were the true owners of the place. But at the moment when the family headed for the exit, one of them, the man of the family, locked eyes with James for a fleeting moment. The millionaire hesitated, haunted by a sense of impossible recognition, he thought, trying to dismiss the idea. The family, with their simple clothes, contrasted sharply with James and his group. They didn't seem to share the same social circles. However, James couldn't shake the feeling of familiarity that enveloped him. Lisa, the waitress who had been serving James's table all night, witnessed everything. Despite the harsh comments and disrespectful behavior of the group, she held her composure, maintaining calm and peace. But upon hearing James conversing with a colleague, something changed. With an air of mystery hanging in the air, the scene unfolded intriguingly. James, curious, asked the group if anyone knew the family that had just left. The waitress, with an attentive ear, delicately interrupted and revealed her knowledge about them. Although they weren't from the neighborhood, she knew them well. A twist was about to happen in James's life, a surprise he never expected. After the brief comment, the waitress returned to the bar to prepare another round of drinks for that table, leaving James with more questions than answers. He was lost, in a sea of thoughts, trying to decipher the identity of that man whose gaze seemed strangely familiar. An uncontrollable shiver ran down his spine. Could he be a figure of great influence? James doubted it, pondering that someone of such stature would never dress so simply. But deep down, something told him that reality might be very different from what he imagined. Lisa, the waitress, moved gracefully around the bar, preparing another round of drinks for the table. With agility and a touch of secrecy, she grabbed her notepad. In a quick gesture, she wrote something. A secret, perhaps, and with almost magical skill, handed the note to James in a way that no one else saw. What could be written on that paper? A message that would undoubtedly add another layer of suspense to that night already full of mysteries. With a mix of hesitation and curiosity, James quickly took the piece of paper and kept it. He didn't want to read it there, under the group's watchful eyes. Why would Lisa leave him a note, and so discreetly? What could she have to say that was so crucial and confidential that the others at the table shouldn't hear? These questions swirled in his mind, creating a whirlwind of speculations and expectations. James's anxiety grew, fueled by the aura of secrecy surrounding the small piece of paper tucked in his pocket. James looked at his companions, still having fun, trying to order a third round of drinks, despite being obviously drunk. At that moment, he tried to disguise his distance and regain the previous enthusiasm, but his mind was far away. Consumed by overwhelming anxiety, James found himself unable to resist the urge to uncover the secrets hidden in that note. Each second of waiting felt like an eternity, and curiosity consumed him from within, bubbling with the need to discover what was written. With a clever plan in mind, he cast a casual glance at the group and, with the skill of an actor, announced that he needed to use the restroom. It was the perfect excuse, a moment of privacy to dive into the enigma tormenting him. With hurried but disguised steps, he walked away, carrying the note that would soon change everything. When he finally read the note, he was even more surprised. The written lines were clear and direct. He had made a grave mistake by insulting and expelling that family from the restaurant. The note announced that the next day, a man James supposedly knew very well would contact him to face the consequences of his actions and pay for them. But it was the last sentence of the note that truly captured his attention and made his heart beat faster. "We reap what we sow, and your harvest day has arrived." These words echoed in his mind, making him break into a cold sweat as the uncertainty of what was to come enveloped him in a fog of anxiety and fear. He had to know more about this note. Who was that family? Why did the waitress know more than he did? How could he get the answers he needed? James's curiosity only grew, wrapped in a cloud of discomfort and apprehension. The man found himself on the brink of an abyss of uncertainties, deeply fearing the waves of consequences his actions might unleash. On the other side of the bar, Lisa watched James with keen and calculating eyes. With precision, she chose the exact moment to deliver the note to James, planning to end her shift soon after this strategic delivery. Her plan was simple but effective. Provide as little information as possible, leaving James in a state of growing nervousness. This was Lisa's subtle way of repaying all the offenses and intimidations the arrogant millionaire had inflicted on others. It was a small but significant revenge. That night, while the shadows of unease danced in his mind, James certainly wouldn't find peace in his sleep. The abusive customer was about to reap the bitter consequences of his actions. Lisa's strategy of leaving James to deal with the situation alone proved successful. That night, James became a shadow of himself, absorbed in thoughts and visibly disturbed. His guests, confused and intrigued, whispered among themselves, wondering if something supernatural had scared him in the bathroom. The abrupt change in his behavior left everyone perplexed. The restaurant's atmosphere, previously animated by James and his guest's presence, was now filled with a silent and intriguing mystery. Like an echo of his actions, fate was about to give James a lesson, a stark reminder of his choices. Lisa, with a satisfied smile from across the street, secretly observed the unfolding of her meticulously crafted plan. Ruining James's and his friend's night was a masterful move, completely diverting the man's attention and shattering his night of pleasures. He looked back at the night's events and wondered how something that started so well could end this way. The restaurant was accustomed to his antics. What difference did this random family make? Lost in his own world, James almost forgot to settle the bill. An unusual slip for him. Even more surprising was his omission in tipping the staff, something totally out of his known character for extravagant generosity and tips. That night, he left not a cent. The staff's tolerance for his presence, which hung by the thread of James's usual generosity, was on the verge. For the rest of the night, lying in his bed, the man was lost in an ocean of doubts. Who was that family? Was the note a real threat? Should he really be worried? The questions echoed in his mind without answers, leaving him restless, eyes open in the dark. The man, always so confident and in control, now found himself drowned in uncertainties, anxiety, and doubt. Sleep, which usually welcomed him easily, eluded him that night. Recent events swirled in his head, a whirlwind of thoughts that gave no respite. James couldn't close his eyes for a single minute, spending the entire night absorbed in imagining who would call him the next day and what the consequences of his thoughtless actions would be. Usually, he was the master of his own destiny, keeping everything under almost perfect control. But that night, that night, was different. The next morning, in his office, James struggled to keep his mind occupied. He tried his best not to be trapped in the anxious wait by the phone, but it was in vain. Every moment, he found himself checking the phone, unable to contain the anxiety consuming him. The expectation of who would be on the other end of the line and what that call would bring was almost unbearable. James was visibly disturbed. Every phone notification echoed like thunder in his agitated mind. As the hours dragged on, a heavy silence hung in the air. Then, late in the afternoon, there was James, immersed in reading a news article, when the sound of his phone broke the silence. He cast a tense glance at the device. Would this be the call he had been waiting for? To his surprise, the number on the screen was all too familiar. It was from Carter Industries, a partner company and a major client of James's company, known for its frequent purchases of auto parts exceeding $1 million a month. James thought it would be just another business call, like so many others, anticipating the satisfaction of another successful sale. For him, it was just another step in his journey of success. However, what James didn't imagine was that fate had other plans for him. This call was not like the others. It was the moment when he would finally face the consequences of his actions. It was time for James to reap exactly what he had sown. A decisive moment he never expected. With enthusiasm, James answered the call, but his expression quickly changed to surprise. On the other end of the line, Robert, the owner of Carter Industries, summoned him to a meeting in the conference room. It was an unexpected invitation, as interactions with Carter Industries were always resolved practically through phone calls and emails. Intrigued, James questioned the purpose of this unusual meeting. But Robert, with a mysterious tone, insisted on the importance of discussing matters face-to-face. With a mix of curiosity and surprise, James followed the call to meet Robert. Upon entering the conference room, an unexpected scene unfolded before his eyes. Partners from his own company and representatives from the renowned Carter Industries were already waiting, gathered around the table imbued with palpable anticipation. As James made his entrance, Robert greeted him with a firm handshake and a penetrating gaze. It was at that moment that a flash of recognition illuminated James's mind. Robert's gaze brought to light that strange familiarity James had experienced when locking eyes with the man at the restaurant. Although Robert was not the same man from the restaurant, there was something in his gaze that rekindled the enigmatic sensation James had felt that day. The intriguing feeling that, in some way, he already knew this person. For a brief moment, James's heart froze, invaded by doubt. Could Robert have any connection with the family he had insulted the night before? He tried to mask his apprehension, maintaining his usual arrogant demeanor, but it was evident, his discomfort and internal worry. With an air of solemnity, Robert began with words of gratitude for everyone's presence. He knew that what he was about to announce was a watershed moment, a crucial moment that, although necessary, would bring consequences for many innocents. The tension was palpable in the air as he prepared to reveal the big announcement. With a firm voice, Robert declared that that day marked a significant turning point for Carter Industries. He announced with a mix of determination and sorrow that from that moment on, all ties and contracts with James's company would be definitively severed. Robert's words echoed through the room, leaving a trail of surprise and disbelief. The faces of those present reflected a mix of shock and confusion, and among them, James stood out. His perplexed expression was the portrait of total surprise, a mixture of disbelief and a visible effort to understand the magnitude of what had just been announced. The silence that followed was heavy, a prelude to unexpected and unprecedented changes. Robert, with unshakable firmness, continued his speech. He emphasized that Carter Industries would never condone attitudes of disrespect and humiliation. He declared with a conviction that resonated throughout the room that, from that moment on, all business relations with James's company were terminated. The reasons were clear. James had revealed himself to be an arrogant, disrespectful, and immature person, belittling and humiliating everyone around him. Robert reinforced that money should never outweigh fundamental human values like respect and empathy. He emphasized that everyone, regardless of their social class, deserves respect and dignity, and nothing justifies humiliating someone for their appearance or social status. Meanwhile, James, overwhelmed by a wave of embarrassment, felt his face grow increasingly red. Words escaped him, and the piercing, judgmental eyes of everyone in the room were fixed on him, intensifying his discomfort. The room, once a stage for business, had now become the setting for a dramatic and unforgettable twist. Robert concluded his speech with a decisive announcement. His company would now make its future purchases from a small local industry known for its unwavering dedication to humanitarian causes. This decision was not just a strategic business change. It was a strong ethical and human positioning. Robert was marking a new era where values and integrity would shape the future of his company, inspiring everyone around with his courageous and conscious choice. James, in his arrogance, could never have imagined the whirlwind of consequences that would follow his disdainful behavior in the restaurant. He didn't know that the family he had humiliated included Thomas, Robert's brother, and that resemblance between the brothers explained the recognition James couldn't decipher. The early return of Robert's family had sparked curiosity and concern about what had happened for them to arrive so early from dinner. It was then that Thomas revealed the humiliating incident at the restaurant, describing how they were disrespected. While James remained oblivious to the true identity of the family he had disparaged, Thomas was fully aware of who James was, known for his fortune and fame. Upon discovering that the perpetrator of the humiliation was James, Robert made a drastic and immediate decision to cut all ties with James's company, causing a colossal loss of over $1 million a month. This unexpected turn of events might have been the shock necessary for James to start rethinking his attitudes and learning to value humility, a costly lesson, but perhaps the only one capable of changing the perspective of a man accustomed to buying everything except respect and dignity. As for the mysterious note, it was nothing more than a clever plan by the waitress herself. She was tired of James's arrogance and intended only to disrupt his night, causing him tension and concern with a false threat. However, she couldn't have imagined that, by a twist of fate, life was already weaving a much more complex plot to teach James a harsh lesson. The news of the incident resonated beyond the city, causing other customers to stop buying products from James's company, boycotting his entire business. After 6 months of an incalculable loss to James's company, with partners divesting their shares, the company began to fail. On the other hand, Robert's company emerged as a beacon of integrity and courage. His valiant act not only elevated his reputation, but also boosted his profits and opened new job opportunities, bringing hope and prosperity to many. Meanwhile, the arrogant James never again had the financial means to frequent his favorite restaurant, a place he once dominated with imposing presence. Finally, now the restaurant's patrons could enjoy their meals in peace, free from the disturbing influence of the arrogant ex-millionaire. The saying, "You reap what you sow," was etched into James's life. Life, in its poetic justice, made him pay for his actions, sealing his fate with a lesson he would never forget. James's fall was not just a story of financial loss, but a powerful reminder that a person's actions can indeed shape their future. And you? Have you ever witnessed someone reaping what they sowed? Leave your response in the comments. Thank you for watching. Comment below what you thought of this story and from which city you are watching us. Leave your like and subscribe to our channel so that together we can build a huge community that shares inspiring stories. See you next time.